In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, hello and regards. This is Muhammad Suleiman Ahmadzai, here with a new session for you, my friends. Try to make your interface look like a command program, which is also an application. For example, whether it's Windows, or whether it's Office applications or other apps. When you are inside a program, the appearance of the program is called the interface. In our discussion, we are inside PowerPoint. For example, what are these parts called, and what is this area called? Well, this is called the interface, and a person should be able to recognize the visual layout of the program. Now, we are working with the visual layout of the Windows screen. When we turn on the computer and enter the computer screen, that same interface is called the Windows interface, which works for you. Look, overall we have 3 types of interfaces, but right now, 2 of them are very well known in the world. One of them is called CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface. The other one is called GUI, Graphical User Interface, Command Line Interface. In the DOS operating system, the operating system we had before Windows, it was called DOS. Try to write this down in the notes section. For example, CMD or Command Prompt opens the DOS window for us. Back when we used DOS, music wouldn't play and everything we did was just by typing, and the result would show up on a black and white screen. In short, it wasn't graphical. It was a command line interface. We would just enter commands in columns, and the interface was in the form of a command line. For example, we would type dar and it would show us a result. With dar/p, you can see that it opens the entire directory folder for us. So, in summary, DOS or Disk Operating System has its own interface called CLI or Command Line Interface. But now that we're studying Windows, its interface is called GUI or Graphical User Interface. Alright, try to stay on the page we're currently on. This is the Windows 10 page. In Windows 11, there are also a lot of visual changes. I'll explain those to you later as well. For now, I'll tell you what the interface is in Windows 10. Try to remember, the first thing we see or are on in this page, all of these are called icons. They call them desktop icons or just icons. An icon is a shape or a symbol that we use for a specific purpose. But these icons are divided into 4 categories. That is, all of them together are called icons. In fact, icons are shapes related to some symbols or figures. Overall, they are small images that represent either computer programs, folders, or files. Later on, we'll explain which one is a file, which one is a folder, and which one is a system folder. In the end, it's just a few lines, but overall, an icon is a shape or a symbol that we use for a specific purpose. Even though it also has a name. For example, look, this icon is the small symbol for our Excel, or it's a small image related to Excel that we have, and in Polish, its name is also written below it. That means every application or file we see, or a folder we see, below it, for example, has its own small image. Similarly, a name is also present below it. So it has both a name and an icon. It's like how a person also has a face. They have a name, and they are distinguished by their face, but having a name is also necessary. Here on this computer, these icons are exactly the part that is generally called an icon, and each icon has its own name, and the icon represents and stands for different things. For example, what are these called? They are called system folders. System folders are icons or folders that are built in. That means they are created by default. When we install Windows, these are already there by themselves. For example, the control panel folder or, say, this PC or my computer, as they used to call it. The My Pictures folder, downloads, for example, Documents, File Explorer. These are folders that are the computer's own default folders. We don't create them ourselves. When you go to the File Explorer section, for example, one of these folders like Downloads, Documents, or Pictures, we didn't create any of them. These are built-in folders. What do they call these themselves? They call them system folders. These folders that we made, among them there are also regular folders. There's also the compressed zip folder, and I'll explain the difference between these folders in the context menu section, how a folder differs from a regular folder. So overall, these are the folders that we created ourselves. These folders are referred to as file folders. These are called applications. These are icons that belong to computer programs. For example, the icon for Word or Excel, or maybe for PUPS or PowerPoint. There's also Dev C++, Paint, Paint 3D, and WhatsApp. Basically, these are special icons, and based on their appearance, we can tell which program they belong to. Whatever its name says, like WhatsApp, Excel, or Word. But sometimes, it's much easier to distinguish a program by its icon than by focusing on its name. A lot of times, when we see Word or Excel, we don't even bother reading the name. We just focus on the icon because it's much easier. So, these are called apps. We call them applications, or apps for short, an abbreviation of application. On the phone, for example, we say App Store, but it's Application Store. Or it says Microsoft Apps or Microsoft Store. When we go inside, we're still dealing with applications or the App Store, but app is short for application. These are called applications. I also call these files for them. File. With you, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Photoshop. The result of that program is a file. For example, this is the Word program. For example, this is a Word file. Again, its program is called an application for us, and this is called a file. We said, overall, we call all of them icons. In the system, we have folders, file folders, applications, and files together. What else do we have? On this page, this picture here is called the desktop background, and it's also called wallpaper. Background or wallpaper. Look, when we go to the personalized section, what do we call this section? Background. It's also called wallpaper. Desktop screen. Alright, after this, we ourselves are this pointer that I can move anywhere. This is called the mouse pointer. In some places, it's also called the mouse cursor. Try to go to a place where we can type. In a place where you can type. For example, see in the search section, when I put the pointer there, it automatically turns into a cursor. When it takes on the cursor shape, it means that if you click here, you can type. You can write text. For example, this section, when it takes on this shape, it means it's a place where we can type. We can write text. But in a place where it takes on this shape, the mouse pointer is just clickable there. It's just a place where you can click, but you can't type. So, this is the state that, if it appears, they call it the mouse pointer, and if it takes on this other state, they call it the mouse cursor. Try to remember, what do they call this part? They call it the Start button. When you click on it, the Start menu opens, and the Start menu itself is a completely separate lesson. When I explain the Start menu in detail later, I'll go over it more thoroughly, but for now, it's just part of the interface. For now, I'm just telling you its visible names. Inside the Start menu, you and I call this part Start. Look, from this corner, what do we call this part? It's called Start, and its name is also Start. Here, by default, you and I, meaning in the standard setup, can have two things there. One of them is your user profile, and the other is the power button. We can't turn these two off or disable them. Among these, we can more or less add or remove things like settings, for example, the Downloads folder or other folders. In other words, there's no standard rule for how many of these should be here. By default, these two things are always present. One of them is your user profile, and the other is the power button. Notice that I added and removed some of these things. You can go to the Start section. For example, in Settings, there's a place called Personalization. Here, we come to a section called Start. Here, there's another option called Choose which folders appear on Start. At the moment, we only have the Settings option here. If we turn off Settings, you'll see that except for those two things I mentioned, which by default can't be enabled or disabled, we won't have anything else left. Later on, they'll say that among these, there are some shortcuts to different folders, and some folders are called system folders. Folders that belong to the computer itself, which we didn't create, are shown here. We can turn them on, for example, to show File Explorer, show Settings, Document, Download folder, Music, Picture, Video, Network, and Personal folder. Now, if we come to Start, you'll see more or less that when you click in the Start section, you can see them. That's why more or less a lot of folders have been added, like Document, Download, Music, Picture, Video, and folders up to Settings. But you can't turn off the Power and User Profile sections. You can't disable or enable them. You can do the rest. There's no standard rule for exactly how many should be on each computer. It depends on your needs and how much you want. It enables and disables them. For example, I personally usually want or expect to have just these two. These two that are there by default. One is the Power button. The other is your user profile. Sometimes we say we only want Settings too, so that we can easily open whatever we need from here or from other places. But usually, since we use Settings a lot, I say let it stay right here. Then again, I might say, well, the only thing I want now is just Settings, and I don't need anything else to show up there. Now, when you go and look, you'll see that in the Start section, it only shows these three things for us, and from there, I only enabled Settings. So, this is what they call the Start. We call this part the App List. The App List starts here and goes all the way to the letter Z, meaning from A to Z. What did they do with this for us? They sorted it so that when we click here, we call these the retail. We see that these are sorted according to the alphabet. Inside the App List, there are three other sections that we have. We refer to this other section as Pinned App Groups. Pinned App Groups means groups of pinned applications. We pin the applications here. After that, we assign groups or folders to them. For example, we ask, what is this group for? The application group or category is Microsoft Office. You can write Office here. Down here, we can say, for example, these folders are for development. That is, you give it a name. For example, when you give a name or title, that name is assigned here for the group. For example, you pin 4 or 5 other applications here based on this group. So here, things are organized into groups, like categories. In the Start menu, we can't have separate groups, like having the Office programs in one category and Internet programs in another. Here, it's sorted. The app list is organized alphabetically from A to Z for us, so things don't get mixed up together. For example, the Office programs are a package. Here, they're not considered a package. Word, since it starts with W, is listed under W. If you look for Excel, it shows up under E. In the E category, so it displays them separately. This wasn't like previous Windows versions. Earlier Windows versions categorized them, for example, showing a folder Microsoft Office. Inside you'd find them, Word, Excel, Access, PowerPoint. Now, it's not like that. In the App List section, applications are sorted A to Z. That's why we need to cover our applications in the App Groups section. Later, we create groups for them, and then we can open them easily and quickly, without needing to search through the Run command, the search bar, or the app list. We can use them easily. We can even place them on the screen. We pin them. Pin to start. We can even bring it to the taskbar and pin it to the taskbar. That comes up in the lessons related to Start, which we'll get to. In Start, we'll learn that 2 applications can be pinned from different places. We'll mention their names, and in Start, we'll say this section is called Start. They call this section App List, and this other section is called the Pinned App Category. They refer to it as the Pinned App Category or Pinned App Groups. The group of pinned applications. On this page, when we right-click, they call this the Context menu. They also refer to the Context menu and this other section as the Tray menu, and it's also known as the Taskbar property. If we right-click on an application, a folder, or something else, it's called a pop-up menu. And if you right-click on something in the Start menu, on an application or a program, this other list is called the Property menu. So, this is what you refer to as the Context menu. This is called the Tray menu or Taskbar property. These are called pop-up menus, and this one is referred to as the Property menu. Property menu. Alright, try to start from this part. Now, what do we call this section? Taskbar. Taskbar. Try it here. Its name is written here as well. It says Locked Taskbar or Taskbar Settings. Setting Taskbar, which again is the same section where I explained the Start setting to you. Below, next to the name Taskbar, there is also a setting, and when we cover Start, I'll also explain the Start setting to you. When we go over the Taskbar section, we'll also work on the Taskbar settings. For now, our lessons are just about the interface, meaning the new look and appearance of Windows. Alright, as we said, starting from this section, this part is called the taskbar, and within the taskbar, the word task itself means a duty or function. Taskbar literally means duty bar or taskbar. Here, for example, it shows any application that has been pinned, as well as any application that is currently open. For instance, if I open the Paint program or any other application, it displays them here as a task. Excel is also open. Paint is open too. PowerPoint is open as well. These are all open. Try it yourself. All of these are pinned applications. They are applications that we have here. Not all of them are pinned. These are pinned applications, meaning we pinned them so they always appear on the taskbar. And these are applications that are temporarily open. How can you tell which ones are temporarily open and which ones are pinned and always there? The ones that are temporarily open have a blue line underneath them for now. These are the applications that are currently open and minimized. But they are still open in the background and have just been minimized. But if we close them, they disappear from the taskbar. For example, if I open Excel and then close it, it no longer shows up in Excel. But these applications, for example, are pinned. For instance, if we open Microsoft, it's open. Right now, there's a line underneath it, which means it's open. But since the application is pinned, even if I close it, it doesn't disappear. But pin means that, for example, the program is pinned, which is shown by that blue line underneath it. But when we close it, it disappears as well. Overall, these opened applications here show us that when there's a blue line underneath, it means these are applications that are open. That is, they are not pinned, they are just open. Well, the taskbar is the taskbar. Any application you open will be shown here for us. What do they call this section from here to here? They call it the notification area. Notification area. On your phones, for example, go to the top section and open the notification area. In the notifications section, you can see we have various notifications like Wi-Fi, battery, Bluetooth, and many other things there. Similarly, on the computer, what do we call this area? Altogether, it's called the notification area, which gives us different notifications, like news and weather, if we want to get information about the weather, or if we want to control our mic. If we want to adjust the volume of the speaker. From there, for example, we can turn on airplane mode or turn Wi-Fi on and off. We can turn the hotspot on and off, just like on mobile phones. If we want to get information about the battery charge, and performance, or make changes to them, we have a language bar to switch languages, like Persian, Dari, or English. We can change the languages. This section is called a date and time viewer. It opens the clock and date, and it also works as a reminder, so we can set a reminder like an alarm clock, saying I want to do this task on this date, and it will remind you. Just like an alarm clock. These are called notifications, and it also shows you some messages here. Messages that come just to the computer, like mobile notifications, will pop up for you. If you want, you can check the box. If you want to clear the notifications, you can do that too. This one, in this corner, has a little button. In previous versions of Windows, it was very obvious how it worked. This is Windows 3, which is smaller and just gives us a thin line. They call it Arrow Peak, which means it doesn't do anything unless you want it to. Its name is Arrow Peak. All it does is, for the applications that are open, it simply minimizes and restores them. The minimize part, it restores. For example, the applications we have open, like here, I have Paint open, I have PowerPoint. If I click it, it gets minimized. After I click it again, it gets restored. Minimize, restore. Basically, here we have something that does this job. Show desktop. So, then, show open windows. It shows them again. In fact, it does the same thing. Alright, what else do we have? Try to notice, when we hover our cursor over an application or over a folder, what do we call these? We call it a folder tip. If we hover our cursor over files as well, that's also called a folder tip, which shows when this folder was created. The size of this folder is 6.9 megabytes. It also shows which files are inside, and that's what we call a folder tip. If we hover our cursor over applications, that's called a tool tip. A tip itself provides a kind of informational note. So what is a tooltip? A tooltip gives a description of the function. For example, here it shows in the folder tip which date it was created, its size, and what's inside it, but the tooltip doesn't show that. In the tooltip, it only gives a definition of the application so you understand what that application is. For example, it might say what the user is. It says, for example, create beautiful documents. Easily work, author, and enjoy doing it. You see, it gives a brief description of a function, telling you what you can do in the Word program. If you hover your cursor over Excel, you'll see it gives you a definition as well. If you hover your cursor over another application, it will clearly state its function for you. What are these called? Tooltips. For example, if you hover your cursor over something in the Start menu or anywhere in Windows, a typical tip appears. See, here it shows you the date and details. This is also referred to as a screen tip. When you bring the cursor here, that's called a folder tip. This one is called a tooltip, and the ones that pop up in these little areas here, those are called screen tips. Alright, try to remember that, as I told you. We said that there are 4 menus. One of them, as I told you, is the context menu. When we right-click here, it's called the tray menu or sometimes referred to as the taskbar properties. If we right-click on any application, that's called a pop-up menu. Pop-up menu. And if we right-click on something in the Start menu, those are called property menus. So, in the end, everything we've covered in the user interface are these elements that make up the appearance of Windows. These are always studied in a practical way. I just told you the names and terms. And finally, dear friends, we kindly ask that if you found the videos helpful, please like the videos and subscribe to the channel to support us and help the channel grow. See you in the next sessions. Goodbye.